Hello and welcome back. I'm Gord Lemon.
And I'm Daryl Hemingway.
To recap, I've had almost 25 years of Canadian real estate investing experience. But this year I'm so excited of the great time I've had investing in the US.
And I have experience in both US and Canadian real estate investing, and I've been a US resident for 20 years now.
We're here to talk about US real estate investing and how Canadians have been taking advantage of, quite literally,
the biggest real estate sales since the Great Depression, where both our investors and ourselves have experienced a ton of great deals.
We had a little fun in our last video as we explained why we're so frustrated not being able to find the kinds of returns on investment that we would expect as Canadian real estate investors.
And why we have recently chosen the US as a great place to invest.
Common mistakes we've seen other Canadian investors make.
And we shared some tools that we use to make decisions about where to invest.
And what kind of property we invest in.
In this video, we will tell you where we are currently buying and the types of properties we're investing in, and the kind of returns ourselves and our investors are enjoying.
There is a common misconception that a lot of Canadians have. They think the foreclosure mess has hit everywhere in the United States, and anywhere you go, there's a great deal.
Conversely, other people ask us, isn't the market still falling? It must be too early to get in.
The truth of the matter is,
each property only goes through the big foreclosure sale once. And the great properties that are on sale today will not be available at those prices a year from now. So today is the time.
The news we get up here in Canada about the US market is all based on averages.
The fact is, different areas were affected differently.
There's certainly amazing deals out there. You just have to know where to look.
Do your due diligence and understand what kind of property to invest in.
Too many Canadians have gone to certain places in the US just because it's popular. They've followed the herd down there, and some have gotten into some trouble.
We know from experience that with the proper knowledge, good direction, and excellent team members, which we have, that you can avoid the potential pitfalls and enjoy some great returns.
So in our last video, we explained why we are investing in the US and why now.
Those graphs we looked at showed that we are at the top of the market cycle in many areas of Canada. We are way above the trend line in many areas of Canada, which explains why we're finding it difficult to find good flips or good cash flowing deals.
We used an example in our last video of the Toronto area showing that the last major bottom was 1996.
The best time to buy.
A lot of research in the US to find where was another 1996 in Toronto.
That's right. We looked for cities in the US that were well below the trend line, where prices were stabilized and were starting to rise again.
Great value now can see predictable appreciation, a strong rental market, and a continuous demand for properties.
And for us today, that place is Phoenix, Arizona.
Ah, the Valley of the Sun. So Daryl, why don't you explain why you ended up in Phoenix?
Well, about 3 years ago, after seeing what was about to happen to the US real estate market, and after selling the 3 properties that I owned in Baltimore, I moved back to Toronto, where I met Michelle Tavares, who was investing in real estate there. We became business partners, and we purchased properties in and around the Toronto area until it became more and more difficult to find great deals.
I can relate. Properties today in Canada are A, too expensive, B, have bad return on investment, C, unappealing cap rates, not very investor friendly.
Exactly.
During the same time, I was traveling the country speaking to many Canadian investors and found they were all experiencing the same frustrating thing.
And now I think it's best to introduce you all to Michelle Tavares and let her help finish the story. Michelle?
Thanks, Gord and Daryl. So after studying the effects produced by the subprime meltdown, we looked to see how the dust was settling in certain areas. We looked to see which cities showed the best stability in economics, immigration, and of course, house values.
Hasn't Arizona been the fastest growing state in the US for decades?
That's right, Gord. The population of Phoenix grows by over 100,000 people each year.
And that number's not going to change anytime soon with the migration of all the baby boomers to this very appealing and attractive retirement destination.
It's the 5th largest American city, according to the US Census Bureau. And the metropolitan area is home to more than 4.3 million people. That's similar in size to Toronto or Vancouver.
So, one of the main transportation, financial, and economic centers of the southwestern United States.
And it is also home to the world's largest university, numerous hospitals, and teams in every major sports league.
Canadians are now the biggest out-of-state investor in Arizona. It is estimated they own approximately $1 billion of U.S. real estate.
Since we were frustrated by the lack of deals in our neck of the woods, we studied specific graphs to understand the trends, like you saw in our last video. We saw that the last low point in Toronto, and obviously the best time to buy, was 1996.
Frustrated at trying to buy at the top of the market in Toronto, we looked around the US to see if there was a city that was in a similar position to Toronto in 1996, at the bottom of its market, starting its upward climb again. And we found that in Phoenix.
You can see that property values appreciated significantly during the boom, overcorrected last year, and are now settling into a slightly upward trend.
Properties that used to sell for $400,000 are now available for $120,000 or $150,000. But that's not what's really important. The prices during the boom were not real anyway. What's more important is to take a look at construction costs. Right now, the average house costs $100 a square foot to build, and yet we're buying these existing homes for $25, $30, or $40 a square foot. Now that's a great bargain in any market. In fact, we are currently buying properties for 20 to 30% below the year 2000 prices. In 2000, that was before the boom, before the bust, before any of that.
Just to give you a value comparison, here's a property that we just sold in Toronto in 2010 for $370,000. This was a fourplex, and it was less than 2,000 square feet. Now here's a property we just bought in Arizona for $133,000. This property is over 4,000 square feet. And by the way, the vacancy in this area is only 4%. Now let's think about that for a minute. That's twice the square footage for 1/3 of the price. That's 6 times the value for your investment dollar.
These differences are typical for what we are finding between the Canadian and U.S. markets today.
When dealing with our rental properties, we often put the 1% rule to the test to see in a second if it's worth pursuing.
The 1% rule being the gross monthly rent should be equal to or more than 1% of the purchase price.
Right, so if you see a property for a $100,000 purchase price, the gross monthly rents should be $1,000 or more.
We were frustrated in Ontario because the properties around here, like where you invest perhaps, were not even coming close to this.
The result?
Low
or negative cash flow.
Right, but the properties that both we and our investors purchase in Phoenix not only pass the 1% rule, they blow by it, often hitting 2%.
When that happens, you get
positive cash flow.
Massive passive income, which means more shoes.
These properties cash flow really well, and they're in good areas.
Location, location, location.
The emphasis on neighborhood is extremely important in Phoenix, as it is in all U.S. cities, even more so than it is in Canada.
We have to be very aware of good and bad neighborhoods, such as crime areas or school districts.
There are good school districts and poor school districts in each U.S. city. Obviously, families want to live in good school districts, which increases the demand for flips as well as rentals.
There are also high crime areas in cities that we want to be sure to avoid.
Some areas are just in more demand than others. We consider all of these factors before purchasing for ourselves or helping our investors to do so.
Right now, we're going to show you a couple of our properties and go over some of the details.
Here's one of the properties that we sold last year. It was a flip, a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house in front of a park which actually had a lake on it. We bought it for $37,000 and we sold it for $63,000. The flipping strategy doesn't work as well today as it may have last year. You never want to get married to a strategy.
The properties we were getting at auctions at a great price last year have become more expensive. Banks are now raising their opening bids, and more amateur investors are in the market overpaying for auction properties. This makes the margins tighter and more difficult to make a profitable spread.
So our current strategy is buy and hold because the rental demand is very high and the prices of the properties we're getting are very low, so the cash flow is fantastic.
Here's a duplex built in 2007. Each unit is 1,200 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, and this property cash flows at $750, and that is after mortgage payments and all expenses. One of our Canadian investors bought this property for only $85,000.
And here's a fourplex that another of our Canadian investors is currently buying. It is over 4,000 square feet and is fully occupied. It cash flows at $1,300 a month after mortgage and all expenses, and our investor is purchasing it for a total of $143,000. This property sold previously for over $350,000.
And currently there's no shortage of these deals, but you have to be ready to buy because there's a lot of competition.
You have to be prepared from a financial perspective, because when a great deal comes along, you've got to be ready to pull the trigger.
But these deals won't last forever. Even though we hear in the news media there are more and more foreclosures, each property only goes through the system once at these prices, and once it's been purchased, it won't come around again.
Most of the subprime properties have been through the system, gone through foreclosure, and have been purchased by somebody else. That wave is over. Now dealing with the ARM catastrophe.
ARM stands for Adjustable Rate Mortgages. Banks gave out these low teaser rates for 2 or 3 years, and then wham! Everything adjusted and their rates went up significantly.
People went from having a mortgage payment of, say, $800 per month to $1,500, $1,600, or even more after the teaser rate had passed.
Ouch!
So now that payments for people are doubling, they are walking away from their homes, putting the keys in the envelope, sealing it up, and mailing it to the bank. This is what they call jingle mail.
And this is the situation we are in now with our purchases. Many of those people who handed in their keys are now tenants again.
And good solid ones at that. They're back having a payment now they can afford.
So in areas where population is growing, there is high rental demand.
And remember, our goal with rental properties is cash flow, and that depends on having renters. So we look for cities where there are strong economic fundamentals, a good supply of jobs, and a good number of workers that will be able to rent from us.
But there is still only a finite number of great properties, and this fantastic opportunity may only last until 2012.
Then it'll be gone. Fine. Done like dinner.
Okay, thanks, Gord. I think they get the point. This is why we urge you to consider this opportunity now. It won't last forever. So when properties go through the foreclosure process, they are quickly purchased by savvy investors like you and me.
So once again, folks, you have to be ready when these deals come up.
Doesn't mean Phoenix is the only area that we're going to invest in. We carefully watch other cities that will have the same criteria. And once they meet our criteria, we'll be investing there as well.
So no matter where you invest, you will want to look at the same criteria that will generate good cash flow for you. In this video, we've shared with you some things about the due diligence we do and the market research that has led us to find these great deals in the US.
You want to look at population trends, employment numbers, economic fundamentals, rental demand, cost of construction, potential for appreciation, and of course, cash flow!
There are a lot of great places in the US that investors can take advantage of, and we're helping Canadian investors to do so in places like Florida, Georgia, Texas, Nevada, and California, to name a few.
Research, having good local knowledge, and having a great team behind you are the keys, especially when investing from Canada. But always remember,
Buy low,
sell high. See you next time.